What's going on, everyone? My name is Suboptimal and I'm just a typical Indian guy who makes videos about web development and productivity. In this basics of Vue.js video, I'm going to go over how you can parse Markdown using the Marked library inside Vue.js. For those who don't know, Marked is a library that helps you convert Markdown text into HTML. It's used in a lot of Markdown apps, including the simple Markdown example inside of the Vue homepage. As a quick overview, this video is going to be split up into 4 parts. First, I'm going to talk about 3 common Markdown parsing libraries that you can use in your Vue app and why I picked Marked.js. Second, we're going to look at how to install Marked.js into your Vue app. Third, we're going to parse the Markdown text and actually display it inside of our Vue app. And finally, we're going to take a look at how to import the marked function globally into our Vue app so we can avoid redundant imports in our specific Vue component files. And before we get started, I'm just going to ask for one small favor from you guys, and that is to leave a like for the YouTube algorithm. I do spend a lot of time making, editing, planning these types of videos, so a small like does go a long way in helping me and the channel out. Cool. With that out of the way, let's get started. I'm sure most of you guys have heard about companies like Notion, Obsidian, and how they're improving the productivity space with Markdown apps and allowing you to build your own blocks and things like that. And I just got a little bit curious as to how Markdown works, and so I decided to do some research, and I came across 3 useful libraries that you could use for your Markdown app. And the first one is Remark, then you got Markdown-it, and you also got Marked.js. Now, some of these libraries work really well with React because there's like React versions of them. In terms of support for Vue, there's not that much support for them yet, but I'm sure there will be in the future. If you're building out your own sort of productivity app, then I highly recommend, doing all the research, seeing which one of these is the best one. But I just picked Marked.js because it has the most stars, and that's usually how you know it's the best. Am I right? So if you're just trying to work with Marked.js and not really trying to build an app, the easiest way to get started is how they do it inside of the Vue.js demo itself. And that is to import it in with a script tag. In most cases, it's not like a best practice to just import random libraries into your app if you're deploying it to production, or if you want to have a local app and you can't connect to the internet or something like that. So in those situations, it's really useful to just npm install it. So let's see how we can do that inside of a Vue CLI project. The easiest way to get started with the Vue project is with the Vue CLI. So once you've installed the Vue CLI, you can do Vue create and just specify a project name. I'm going to call this Marked example. So once you do that, Vue is going to ask you to set up a couple things, and I'm just going to pick Vue 3, ESLint with error prevention only, lint on save, dedicated config files, just the usual things that I always do. You can use whichever settings you like. And this is going to take a couple seconds, so I'll see you guys once it's been installed. So once your project is installed, you can just cd into the directory and run a npm run serve. This is going to just get the Vue project up and running inside of localhost 8080, so we can go here and ensure that everything is up to date. Now that we've got Vue inside of our project, let's just add a sample Markdown text and display that, right? So let me go to my app.vue file, and I'm going to remove all these things because we don't really care about them. I'm going to create a new div, and inside of here, I just want to display some Markdown. And let me remove this, and let's create that data point that we want to display. Markdown, and let's just say that it's just going to say hello world. So once we save that, we should see hello world inside of our project. Cool, so you guys see it right over here. But technically, this Markdown is supposed to be converted into a header. Instead of displaying Markdown just, in a text format, we want to convert this Markdown into what it's supposed to be represented as inside of the HTML. So what we want is this thing right here, where we want to display hello world, but we want to convert it into a header, because when you do hashtag, that's a header in HTML. So let's see how we can accomplish that inside of our Vue app. So inside of our Vue app, all you do is run npm install marked. It's going to allow you to import the marked function into your project and parse Markdown. The first thing we want to do is import the marked function, and we can do that inside of our app.vue script tag. So once we import marked, we want to call it, and we want to call it on the Markdown that we have. Let's make this a computed function so that whenever Markdown changes, it's going to re-render the HTML. I'm just passing in Markdown, this.markdown into marked, and that's going to return an HTML. And so the last thing we want to do is display that HTML inside of our project, right? We want to display this, so it's very straightforward to do that in Vue as well. All we got to do is create a div and pass in a property called v-html, which basically means that the value that is getting passed in here is HTML, and Vue is going to render that into our project. So once we save that, you'll notice here that we got a basic Markdown app working. And so the next thing we might want to do is to be able to edit this Markdown inside of our Vue app. So how can we do that? Well, let's add a text area, right? Let's add a text area, and this area is going to be the data model is going to be bound to the Markdown data point. So we can say v model, and we can say this is going to it's going to track Markdown. So if we save that, let's see what happens. We got our small text area. And as you can see, if I start typing, then this new Markdown at the bottom is changing, because the computed function is getting run every time this.markdown is changing. So we're going to update this every time Markdown is changed. And because we bound Markdown into a text area, and every time we type inside of this text area, it's going to change, the HTML is going to re-render, and we're going to get our Markdown app. So let me just sort of do this one more time, right? I'm going to do a italics this time. Hello. And you'll see here that it's in italics, right? And maybe I'll make it a header as well. There you go. It's a header in italics. So that's how you can quickly get started with marked inside of your application. The important thing here is that usually when you're working with any sort of application, you don't want to import it into every component. Say you have a couple components, right? Maybe you have hello world, you have a Markdown component, you have like 10 different Markdown components. You don't want to be importing them every single time into all of your components. So let's refactor this code and import marked globally, so that once we import it globally, we don't have to import it into every single one of our subcomponents, and we can just use marked as a function that is registered inside of our entire Vue app. And so importing marked as a global function is really straightforward. All we got to do is go to our main.js file inside of our Vue app, and here we're going to import marked. And then we have to create a mixin. A mixin is basically a way to distribute reusable functionalities for Vue components. So the easiest way to globally import marked into our project is to create a marked mixin. I'm creating this marked mixin, and basically all it is it's going to be a method. And this method is just gonna, it's gonna be called marked. We can call it whatever we want. We can call it ASD, we can call it MD, we can call it whatever we want. But basically, whenever we call this function inside of our components, we want to run the marked function. I'm importing it, I'm creating the mixin, and then of course I have to incorporate that mixin into my Vue project, and that's what I do right over here. So previously what you would see if you just did the Vue CLI, you'd see like create app and then .mount to the app. But here I'm adding this .mixin thing, and that's just going to allow us to use this function inside of all of our Vue components. So let's see how we change our app.vue's code, right? So now we don't have to import this into our app anymore. We won't be able to use marked, but what we can use is the MD function that we added as a mixin. So what we can say is you can do this.md. And so if I save that, this should basically have the same functionality as what we had before, except this time we refactored the code and we added a mixin so that we don't have to import marked into every single one of our components. So I saved it. Let me just make sure that it is up and running, and let me go to the file and refresh the page, and there you have it. So if I start typing again, like hi, or maybe I'll type in the italic version of this, hello, right? It's working just as expected, except this time we sort of refactored it and it's a little bit cleaner and we don't have to do all these imports if we're using Markdown inside of other components. So yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two about how to set up Marked inside of your Vue.js projects. And if you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button and consider subscribing for more suboptimal content just like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.